At 5:08 a.m., the glass walls of the Bel Air hillside mansion still reflected nothing but pool lights and the faint orange glow of Los Angeles waking up in the distance. Sprinklers clicked across terraced hedges. A valet stand sat empty by the circular drive. From the street below, the property looked like what it had always claimed to be: another private residence owned by another discreet luxury investor hiding behind another limited liability company. Then the gate lock snapped under federal order. FBI agents moved through the motor court with IRS-CI financial investigators 2 steps behind them. One team cleared the lower garage. Another went straight for the office wing identified in a sealed warrant. A third entered the wine cellar after a contractor's tip suggested the back wall dimensions did not match county plans. By 5:16, a pry bar hit imported oak paneling and the house stopped being a residence. Behind the wall sat a steel vault room, climate-controlled and soundproofed. Shelves carried vacuum-sealed currency bricks stacked beside offshore account binders, bearer share certificates, spare passports, and a ledger masked as interior design invoices. An agent counted 6 encrypted phones on one shelf and 12 property deeds on another. The first rough total reached $9.4 million in cash before dawn. But the cash was only the visible layer. Inside the same hidden chamber were transfer codes tied to trusts in Malta, Belize, and Cyprus, plus handwritten notations linking city permitting consultants, private lenders, and real estate escrow officers to luxury property flips across Los Angeles County. This was no celebrity tax scheme. And this was a laundering architecture embedded in the high-end housing market, protected by paperwork, shell companies, and people paid to look away. By sunrise, 11 luxury properties would be under federal search, 6 hidden wall vaults would be discovered, and a money trail stretching far beyond California would begin to surface. The investigation began with a wire that should have blended into the daily noise of Southern California real estate. On April 22, 2025, a compliance analyst at Pacific Crest National Bank in Century City flagged a $1.8 million transfer moving from a Beverly Hills design consultancy into a trust account linked to a shell buyer named Silver Dune Holdings. The payment memo described custom stone restoration for a residence under renovation in Holmby Hills. There was one problem. County permitting records showed no active restoration permit, no inspection requests, and no lawful contractor draw schedule for the address listed on the wire. The bank filed a suspicious activity report. Normally, that would have generated a quiet paper review. Instead, within 72 hours, the same consultancy sent 3 more payments through unrelated escrow channels, each broken into smaller amounts, each landing at different title intermediaries, and each tied to properties that had changed ownership without visible mortgage exposure. That caught Treasury's attention. IRS-CI analysts overlaid the transfers against property filings and found a pattern repeated across Brentwood, Bel Air, Beverly Hills, Sherman Oaks, and Malibu. Purchase prices were inflated. Improvement budgets were exaggerated. And vendor chains looped back to the same legal preparers and registered agents. Meanwhile, one confidential source in the luxury construction market told agents certain design projects required workers to build rooms that did not appear on blueprints and could not be discussed once the final drywall went up. That statement changed the case. FBI Los Angeles opened a joint money laundering and public corruption assessment in June. Agents subpoenaed escrow records, contractor invoices, and utility anomalies. In 3 properties, electrical use suggested climate-controlled interior spaces larger than disclosed floor plans. In 2 others, freight delivery logs showed repeated armored transport visits, even though no art inventory or jewelry declaration existed for insurance purposes. At first, an investigator suspected tax evasion wrapped in real estate vanity. Then the names began repeating. The same escrow officer, the same private lender, the same permit expediter, the same consultant who never appeared as owner, seller, or builder, yet touched nearly every transaction. The houses were not merely hiding money, they were built to process it. Once warrants opened the first tranche of financial data, the mansion network stopped looking like a cluster of suspicious properties and started looking like a managed laundering corridor. The architecture had 3 layers. Layer 1 was acquisition. Shell companies with polished names acquired luxury homes through cash-heavy deals or hard-money bridge financing designed to avoid deep lender scrutiny. Layer 2 was enhancement. Contractors issued inflated invoices for imported finishes, high structural redesigns, landscape overhauls, and high-security retrofits. Layer 3 was extraction. The same money, now disguised as legitimate property value or reimbursable construction expenditure, moved outward through offshore trusts, consulting fees, art purchases, and private investment vehicles. 9 shell companies formed the visible skeleton: Silver Dune Holdings, Marrow Lane Estates, Pacific Laurel Design Group, Veritas Canyon Capital, Blue Meridian Escrow Advisors, Solterra Asset Restoration, Ardent Vale Trust Services, Hollow Oak Development, and Crescent Reef Imports. On paper, they had distinct purposes. In reality, they shared preparers, proxy directors, payment processors, and document couriers. Treasury traced $140 million in offshore transfers linked to the ring through Cyprus, the British Virgin Islands, Malta, Panama, and the United Arab Emirates. Some funds returned to California as clean investment capital. Some paid for aircraft leasing, rare watches, and art. Some settled bribes disguised as advisory retainers for zoning support, code relief, or inspection prioritization. The laundering engine did not simply hide cash. It converted illicit money into market-respected assets. Then came the public integrity angle. A city permit expeditor expedited revisions that should have drawn structural review. A retired building inspector signed off on inaccessible crawlspace closures, later found to conceal vault walls. A private security consultant with former law enforcement ties arranged camera blind spots and panic room exemptions. An escrow vice president cleared transactions despite incomplete beneficial owner disclosure. A county-connected land use attorney helped buffer high-risk buyers behind layered trusts. This was bigger than hidden cash in fancy houses. It was a corruption support system inside the luxury property economy, where brokers, vendors, consultants, and facilitators could each claim they handled only one harmless fragment of the deal. By late fall, investigators had mapped 11 target properties and linked them to laundering flows, bribery exposure, and asset concealment across Los Angeles. And yet, the most damaging discovery had not come from the bank, the blueprints, or the overseas wires. It came from a carpenter's measurement notes recovered during a separate tax search in Van Nuys. The notes included wall depths, humidity control settings, and one phrase underlined twice: room behind room. The system worked because luxury real estate can absorb anomalies that would look ridiculous anywhere else. In an ordinary business, a $680,000 invoice for imported marble restoration raises alarms. In a Bel Air residence, marketed as a one-of-one architectural compound, it looks expensive but plausible. A hidden steel door behind walnut millwork sounds suspicious in a warehouse. In a trophy estate marketed around privacy and security, it sounds like a feature. The ring exploited that cultural blind spot. Cash entered first through criminal enterprises that needed cleaning. Federal investigators later tied the broader network to narcotics brokerage, illegal gambling, foreign bribery proceeds, securities fraud, off-books commissions, and extortion revenue. Those upstream crimes fed cash couriers, structuring deposits, and third-party loan paydowns into the Los Angeles property engine. Once inside, the money split. One stream funded cosmetic renovations. One stream inflated vendor payments. One stream moved through escrow holdbacks and consulting agreements. Another was parked physically inside hidden wall vaults until a property refinance, staged resale, or offshore purchase allowed it to reemerge with a cleaner story. That is why 6 hidden wall vaults mattered so much. They were not mere hiding places. They were timing devices within the laundering cycle. What looked like architecture was actually accounting. Workers were compartmentalized. Framers built double walls without knowing who would line them. Electricians installed separate HVAC and humidity systems under wine preservation or server closet work orders. Security installers signed non-disclosure agreements and believed they were protecting celebrity clients. Interior designers built custom cabinetry that concealed steel reinforcement. By the time the final house was photographed for private sale decks, the laundering infrastructure had become part of the home itself. And because the properties sat inside legitimate neighborhoods, every layer borrowed prestige from its surroundings. Bel Air, Brentwood, Beverly Hills, Malibu, tree-lined streets, concierge contractors, polished escrow offices, discreet legal counsel. The ring hid inside environments where privacy is sold as a luxury and intrusive questions are treated as bad manners. That was the mechanism. Not sloppy crime. Curated concealment, built wall by wall, invoice by invoice, wire by wire. The operational core centered on 4 figures. Elliot Voss, 54, was the financial architect. Publicly, he styled himself as a private capital advisor handling distressed luxury assets. Privately, prosecutors allege he coordinated acquisitions, proxy ownership chains, and offshore rerouting with the discipline of a logistics chief. He rarely appeared on title. He almost never sent direct instructions twice. Marina Calder, 47, ran Pacific Laurel Design Group and gave the network its aesthetic camouflage. Calder's invoices covered imported stone, bespoke millwork, acoustic upgrades, custom storage, and environmental preservation rooms. Agents later concluded she knew precisely which design packages existed to beautify a home and which existed to hide money inside it. Thomas Rayner, 61, was the compliance shield. A former municipal building official turned private permit expeditor, Rayner understood which revisions triggered deeper plan review and which could slide through as interior modifications. If a vault wall needed to become a mechanical chase, Rayner knew the language. Then there was Serena Vale, 39, an escrow executive whose office never handled the largest deals on paper, yet kept appearing at decisive moments. Vale moved holdbacks, accelerated same-day closings, and pushed incomplete beneficial owner packets through under client pressure exceptions. Investigators said she made dirty money feel transactionally respectable. Around them operated contractors, nominee managers, attorneys, art brokers, and overseas trust administrators. But the key fact was this: nobody in the Corps looked theatrical. They looked expensive, polished, credentialed. The kind of professionals people expect to see around homes worth $20 million or more. That was the disguise that kept the walls standing. Operation Velvet Ledger began at 4:58 a.m. on March 19, 2026, from coordinated staging points in West Los Angeles, Burbank, and downtown federal offices. FBI Los Angeles led the action with IRS-CI, Treasury enforcement teams, DOJ money laundering prosecutors, and selected local support kept outside the financial circle under investigation. Search and seizure warrants targeted 11 luxury properties, 3 design and escrow offices, 2 storage facilities, and a private lending suite in Century City. The first operational priority was financial containment. At 5:04, freeze orders hit 24 domestic accounts tied to shell companies, escrow reserves, and consultant retainers flagged for immediate dissipation risk. At 5:09, digital teams entered Pacific Laurel Design Group before staff arrival and cloned servers containing vendor billing histories, cabinet schematics, and encrypted client notes. At 5:13, agents served a warrant on Blue Meridian escrow advisors and seized closing binders before any emergency shredding protocol could start. Then the houses were breached. Bel Air first, then Holmby Hills, Beverly Hills, Brentwood, Malibu, Sherman Oaks, Hollywood Hills, Pacific Palisades, Encino, Studio City. One by one, federal teams opened wine rooms, gym walls, panic doors, service basements, and sealed library panels. In 6 of the 11 properties, hidden wall vaults were discovered exactly where covert construction notes suggested they would be. One held cash and gold bars, and another held art purchase agreements and offshore trust keys. A third contained cash-counting machines beside fragrance diffusers and insulation, designed to keep both sound and mold away from currency. The early picture looked decisive. Cash, accounts, documents, people in custody. But that was only the beginning. At 6:02, live exploitation of Marina Calder's office tablet revealed a standing instruction set for emergency asset migration. If any property search began, couriers were to move reserve cash from 2 non-target residences and shift 3 offshore beneficiary designations before noon Pacific time. Treasury reacted within minutes. Additional restraint orders went out. Surveillance teams already positioned near One Beverly Crest address and a marina-side storage unit in Marina del Rey moved under secondary warrant authority. At 6:41, Elliot Voss was arrested on a private driveway in Brentwood while attempting to leave in a Maybach with 2 encrypted drives hidden in a medical bag. Serena Vale was detained inside her Century City office after trying to authorize a wire release to Malta from a backup workstation. Thomas Rayner was taken at a gated condo in Westwood with permit files and handwritten inspection notes in his briefcase. By midday, 18 individuals had been arrested. $67 million in cash and assets had been seized or restrained, and the first 6 vault discoveries had already redrawn the scale of the case. And still, agents kept cutting deeper into walls, closets, and transaction files because the evidence suggested one final truth. The mansions had not been the end point. They had been the machinery. The evidence catalog read like a cross between a construction archive and a covert banking manual. Agents seized 14 encrypted phones, 22 laptops and storage devices, 31 closing binders, 48 contractor notebooks, and 6 full vault inventories tied to wall concealments, humidity systems, and access code rotation schedules. They recovered luxury watch certificates, bearer share documents, offshore trust passwords, concealed camera diagrams, and handwritten disbursement sheets matching vendor invoices to cash withdrawals. Treasury confirmed 24 financial accounts frozen and traced $140 million in offshore transfers through layered jurisdictions. Not all of that money sat in Los Angeles. The significance was structural. The city's luxury housing market had been used as a laundering buffer, absorbing illicit capital, recoding it as property value, and then releasing it outward through sanitized financial instruments. 9 shell companies were exposed directly. Additional entities remained under review. Investigators also opened bribery and corruption angles tied to permitting, inspection handling, and escrow compliance exceptions. The question was no longer whether hidden money had been stored inside walls. The question was how many professionals had been paid to make abnormal features look ordinary on paper. That is the kind of evidence federal prosecutors prize most. Not just the cash, but the system explaining why the cash could survive inside a legal economy for so long. Javier Molina spent 11 months framing walls in houses he would never be allowed to enter through the front door. He told agents one supervisor measured every cavity twice and ordered crews to stop asking why some closets needed steel reinforcement, separate ventilation, and restricted access. Molina said the fear was quiet, not theatrical. Workers knew something was wrong. They also knew jobs disappeared when questions started. Alicia Warren, who inherited a neighboring property dispute in Brentwood, later learned the estate beside her had cycled through shell ownership and inflated renovation permits while she spent 2 years fighting unexplained drainage changes and nighttime deliveries. She had complained repeatedly and was treated like an irritated homeowner bothered by wealthy neighbors. In reality, she had been living beside a laundering site. The civic cost in Los Angeles was not only financial, it was institutional. Once luxury markets become safe harbor for concealed money, honest contractors, buyers, and residents begin operating inside distorted prices, distorted permits, and distorted trust. The wall stops being just a wall. It becomes proof that prestige can purchase silence. By late 2026, federal prosecutors had filed money laundering conspiracy, wire fraud, structuring, obstruction, tax offenses, and public corruption-related counts against the principal defendants and multiple secondary facilitators. Asset forfeiture proceedings moved against properties, vehicles, art, and reserve accounts. Professional licensing inquiries opened around escrow compliance, permit consulting, and contractor misrepresentation. Public attention focused on the spectacle of hidden cash behind mansion walls. That was understandable. And it was not the real center of gravity. The real significance of the case was systemic. Los Angeles did not simply host a cluster of wealthy criminals hiding money in expensive homes. It hosted a laundering architecture capable of converting illicit proceeds into social legitimacy. A wall vault alone is dramatic. A wall vault supported by title paperwork, design invoices, escrow handling, permit language, offshore trusts, and prestige neighborhoods is something more dangerous. It is a bridge between criminal capital and mainstream economic respectability. That is why the raid pattern mattered. 11 luxury properties, 18 individuals arrested, 6 hidden wall vaults discovered, 9 shell companies exposed, 24 financial accounts frozen, $67 million in cash and assets seized or restrained, and $140 million in offshore transfers traced. Those numbers describe an enforcement success. They also describe how deeply laundering can root itself inside routine sectors of urban wealth. And the ending was not clean. On an encrypted drive recovered from Voss's vehicle, analysts found draft acquisition plans for 3 additional estates and 1 commercial conversion in Orange County, each annotated with the same coded references to cabinet depth, climate zones, and private reserve integration. Another file listed foreign buyers interested not in living inside the homes, but in using them as capital shelters between election cycles, sanctions exposure, and corporate restructuring. The architecture was scalable. That was the warning. So the final image should not be the glamorous facade or the cash stacked under imported paneling. It should be the permit stamp, the escrow packet, the polished invoice, the contractor call sheet, and the quiet assumption that if something is expensive enough, no one will question what sits behind the wall. That assumption is what federal agents shattered in Los Angeles. The money moved through homes, but the real structure was trust. And once a city's most prestigious property corridors can be used as laundering machinery, the next hidden vault does not require a criminal underworld to survive. It only requires enough professionals willing to call concealment a feature and enough institutions willing to confuse luxury with legitimacy.